Thanks, Angie. And thank you all to everybody for attending on a Saturday afternoon or morning with us to hear a little bit about how NAVDA has done in 2021. And also some of the data that I'm going to be reporting actually reflects what's been happening specifically for the last 10 years with respect to growth of NAVDA, and a lot of the things that Bob Hauser, our vice president, reported on. I'll also be referencing those as well through my presentation. So again, I'm Andy Doak from Maine, Director of Promotions for NAVDA. And without further ado, go ahead, Angie, with the first slide. This slide here, for those who have attended our annual meetings, this probably looks a little bit familiar. It is a very important slide, though, I think that we all need to keep in perspective, and that's what NAVDA really is. NAVDA means a lot of different things to a lot of different people, but that statement in the middle, that NAVDA exists to help people experience the thrill of a well-trained hunting dog, is very true. That statement, it was actually the core statement that drove and still drives our strategic plan. And everything that NAVDA is and falls under really references back that one statement. We took a lot of time as an executive board 3 years ago to really nail down what we do as an organization, and everything is really based on that. So as you as chapter leaders are thinking about how you can promote NAVDA, it really all comes back to that one statement. Those experiences that we partake in and experience with friends and family and our dogs are really all linked to what NAVDA does as a whole. And within that, of course, we have three main pillars, and that is always has been and always will be in the future, training, testing, and ultimately hunting. It's equally as important to look at those as across the board equal as far as what we do as an organization. So that's what I always try and keep in mind. I hope you all do too. And again, specifically, this has driven a lot of the success, that one statement, and remembering that it's linked so much to what we do in the past and will be in the future. So go ahead, Angie. First, I want to acknowledge a couple of key people that are part of a promotions committee that support myself and promotions activities. Those include Jeg Bartels from Pennsylvania, Brad Bischoff from Minnesota, Brandon Smith from Washington. So we really have a cross-sectional array of people from different parts of the country on this committee. In addition to that, Maria in the office is an integral part to everything that we do as a committee, Marion Hoyer, and also Tim Otto, Director of Publications. Between those 6 people and myself, we're working on things pretty consistently each week and months to make sure that things are going in the right directions. Primarily, one of the things that this committee does is actually reviews new chapter applications to make sure that they've met the standards of new chapter applications. I'll go into a little bit more on chapter growth later on in the slide, but there is a specific form that was revamped about 2 or 3 years ago, simplifies the process a little bit. The biggest thing for new chapters is actually to make sure that your testing grounds are acceptable to host an NA, UPT, or UT test. That's really a requirement going forward, has been for a few years now if you're starting a new chapter, that main requirement. Go ahead to the next slide. This graph is really a pretty important graph in my view. It's exciting, but it's boring at the same time. I know Tim Otto will talk a little bit about this as well. But the basics of this graph show how people actually hear about or enter the world of NAVDA. The number one thing that has been always the case, it's always consistent, is the 41% that your breeders bring most people into the organization. Separate to that, a friend or you hear about NAVDA through another member, word of mouth, whatever you'd like to call it, is that 29% part of the pie chart as well. All the other small areas are areas that we dive into and we've tried to expand, which we have expanded successfully over the last 10 years, and is also makes up a good chunk of where NAVDA hears about us. When you renew your membership or you buy a membership every year, you're asked specifically on the online form. There's a drop down to actually for you to tell us how we hear about NAVDA. In addition to that, we know that this is where those numbers come from directly. But in addition to that, the surveys that we're doing on an annual basis also prove that these numbers are factually correct as well. As Bob mentioned, the survey that we sent out went out to just about 2,000 members as a whole. So a pretty good chunk of the membership responded back to that survey, and we also saw similar numbers as well. So we know for sure that the way that people are hearing about NAVDA is very much correct in what's represented here. Go ahead to the next slide, Angie. This graph, again, I think is probably one of the most powerful to look at. It's simplistic when you first look at it, but it actually paints a whole picture of what NAVDA has done with respect to growth, all the way dating back from the first day of NAVDA in 1969. So for the last few years, we've started to look at this growth again, all the way back to our inception and what's really been going on. So you can see the numbers show kind of what we're doing on 10-year intervals as far as respect to the growth of the organization. Up until about 2014, 2015, if you can look at the right-hand side of the graph, you'll see that growth rate is very, very sharp. So that time period, the 10-year time period that's taken place, it's really 11 years, 2010 to 2021. We have just about doubled in size in membership. So that's clearly a hats off to all of the people involved. As Rick Holt mentioned, membership growth was really one of the deciding factors. If we could financially say that we can afford to hire a managing director, and we've reached that milestone, and this year, obviously, we came through on that goal related to the strategic plan. So membership growth is one of the reasons why we now have a person as experienced as Kim working for us. If you compare 2021 to 2020, the membership actually increased 13.6%. That's an extremely strong number. And actually, if you take an average of the last 11 years of the membership growth of NAVDA, it's actually been 9.7% each year. And that's an extremely strong number for an organization like us. When other dog groups, other outdoor groups, seem to be struggling, we just seem to be continuing on that path of success of bringing people into the organization. And a lot of that, again, is your credit as leaders of the organization and your local chapters. You have a huge influence in bringing new members into the organization. So it's a huge thank you to all of you that are on this call, that we've come to this point as an organization reaching over 10,000 members. It's something to be very proud of, and that I know that you all work very hard at getting people into the organization. You can go to the next slide, Angie. Interestingly, we are also looking at the number of chapters. It's one thing to bring a lot of members in, but also what should run in parallel with that is growth of chapters across the US and Canada. So if you look at the text up in the left-hand corner, in 2020, we actually had 80 US chapters, 12 in Canada. That number increased to 84 in the US, still 12 in Canada, with a total of 96. The new chapters in 2021 were the Coastal Plains in North Carolina, the Northern Lights in Alaska, Four Rivers in Kentucky, and I might add that that's the first chapter we've ever had in Kentucky, so we've expanded into that state. So we appreciate that effort from that new chapter. Kansas NAVDA chapter, which is in Goddard, Kansas, that actually was a chapter that was just approved recently and will also be operating in Kansas. If you look at the rate that we increased chapters by about 4.3%. And if you look at the total average increase the last 11 years, the same time range that I spoke of with our membership, our strong membership increase, that's the chapter increase is at 2.6. So this gives a graphical representation really across the board of both US and Canadian chapters, what we've done as far as growth, again, all the way back to 1969. You can go ahead to the next slide. Now, as I started putting this data together, this is a graph that I actually added in this year. And, as I was kind of looking at this and particularly referencing some of the things that Bob Hauser mentioned in our annual survey that I hope you were all part of, one of the number one things was feedback to us that members are looking for more chapters. So as we started seeing that feedback and putting this data together, I decided to overlay membership growth compared to chapter growth. And naturally, membership growth is extremely strong. But seeing the chapter applications come in on a yearly basis, I kind of had a hunch that it was nowhere near similar to the membership growth. So if you notice on the left-hand side, yes, we've increased by about 4 chapters compared to 2021, but the rate of increase clearly is less than the membership growth. And I think that also is related to some of the feedback that we are hearing in our surveys, that people want more chapters, they want more training opportunities, they want more testing opportunities. They just want to see those opportunities for them at the chapter level really increase as much as possible. So I would offer to you all, well, I know you're the leaders of your individual chapters, but if there is talks or discussions that maybe that you want to start a new chapter in your area, or a member wants to start a new chapter in your area, first and foremost, I would strongly encourage that. And I would encourage you, any of you that hear about that, to reach out to me personally, and I'll help you guide you through that process. It's really important that as membership growth increases, that chapter growth increases too, because we want to make sure that the infrastructure that we have at the chapter level also matches our membership growth. So something that I will tell you that our board of directors spoke heavily about this week in our meetings. We're mindful of it. We're watching those statistics. We want to make sure that everybody is getting a good experience, is able to get into tests, is able to get access to the training that they want. So ultimately, as you have new members coming into the organization, that they continue to stay happy, and we maintain that 90% positive feedback that we're hearing in our surveys. So go ahead to the next slide, Angie. One of the things that's been referenced already pretty heavily as it relates to chapter training is a new program that we started about 2 or 3 years ago called the Training Seminar Assistance Program. This was a program that was developed directly from feedback in the 2019 membership survey. And in addition to that, it is also linked heavily to our strategic plan. What we basically developed is a program where chapters can apply for partial funding if they'd like to host a specialized training clinic. It's really designed for new chapters that don't have broad experience in training. Some of the chapters that have been around for 20, 30 years that are 100, 200 members plus, it's really not necessarily designed for those folks, because within those large chapters, you also have the ability to reach out to experienced chapter members that can help provide that training. So a new chapter getting off the ground is a great opportunity for this chapter. We've actually already received our first application. That new chapter that I mentioned in Alaska that's just started, they've applied for and have been approved for a specialized training clinic this year. You go ahead and move that slide forward, Angie. So what will NAVDA fund? NAVDA will provide a maximum of $500 in matching funds. These could be travel, lodging, food, seminar costs, cost of birds, anything that would be related to hosting a specialized training clinic for your chapter. Go ahead and move that forward again, Angie. What will not be funded, what we don't fund, is purchase of training equipment for the event or the chapter. We really are looking at the logistical items that we want to approve for your individual chapter, applying for that. I think there's one more bullet point there, Angie. In 2021, 3 applications received and 2 met the criteria to be funded. Truthfully, we'd really like to see that number increase. Granted, the program has only been around. 2022 is the 3rd year of the program, so we'd really like to see some increase in those applications, and hopefully we can move forward and see a few more applications come in. You can go ahead to the next slide. And on this slide, obviously, we take some time to mention the people that support us, the organizations that support us in relation to sponsors and our conservation partners. These folks that you see here, their logos and their company names, they've been with NAVDA for a long, long time and really have been unwavering in their support over the years. I will say to you that 2020 and 2021, obviously, you all know that was very difficult for some companies. Supply chain issues were an issue. But all of these companies that you see, Purina Pro Plan, Ugly Dog Hunting, Garmin, Dakota 283, Rough Grouse Society, and Pheasants Forever, Quail Forever. They did not change their sponsorship support whatsoever for NAVHDA in 2020 and 2021. And that looks like it's going to be the case for 2022 as well. So even with a difficult time for companies and organizations, they all stood by NAVHDA in what they can do for us, even providing additional support when asked as well. So these companies, we look forward to working with them for 2022. I can't stress enough that it makes sense, and I would ask you to support these companies because they support what you love to do, which is NAVHDA, and in return, we'd ask you to support them. Again, our exclusive sponsors, Purina Pro Plan, Ugly Dog Hunting, and Garmin. Our kennel sponsor is Dakota 283, and we also have Rough Grouse Society, Pheasants Forever, and Quail Forever as our conservation partners. We look forward to working with them for another strong year. So in closing, again, I think I would just thank you all. Some of the bigger picture items that I've reported here, we've in my time on the board, the common question that I always hear is, how can we do better? How can we increase NAVHDA's experience? How can we get more members involved in the organization? I think if you look back at the last 10 years of what NAVHDA has done, it's pretty incredible. That was about, again, 3 years ago, the strategic plan drove a lot of these goals home, and will continue to drive it home as we go into 2022. So thank you for all that. And again, I appreciate you guys spending the time with us this weekend.